Alice. How are you, Beck?
I'm good, Sally. How are you?
Good. I'm actually really excited for today because we're doing a case study.
I know, one of my favourite things to do.
It's so juicy. This is what we live for as a sleep consultant. And we haven't done one on this podcast since the very first episode, which is still our number one most listened to episode, which is all about the 3 to 2 nap drop. So if you haven't listened to that, definitely go and listen to it.
Yeah.
But today we're getting stuck into another case study. Now, we've kind of morphed a real case scenario that we experienced and have changed a few things so that, you know, we never want a parent to listen and be like, that's my baby. But the way we're going to nut it out is the same way that happened in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much to say. I'm just going to read it out. I'm going to read out the case study and then we can dive in. So,
okay, and we did change names. We will use babies. Yes. We did change baby's name, toddler's name.
Absolutely. And I think we decided that whenever we do case scenarios, we're going to get really creative with the names and try a whole lot of things and use names from all sorts of different lists. So today we meet Marty McFly.
Marty.
Marty. Martin is 14 months and is still on 2 naps. He can self-settle but is a picky eater. He wakes at 4:30 a.m. every morning and Mum reports absolutely nothing will get him back to sleep. Over the last 6 weeks, they give him 15 minutes to see if he will go back to sleep and then they get up to start the day. His naps are 9 till 11:30 a.m. for nap 1, 3 till 3:30 for nap 2 and 6 p.m. bedtime because he is cranky and tired. He then wakes at 10 p.m. for a full milk bottle and 4:30 a.m. awake to start the day again.
Oh.
Where shall we begin?
Yeah, I mean, because anywhere in the 4s for me, and I'm just sort of thinking, it never would it ever occur to me to just pull the pin and start the day. But working with so many families who are just at their wits' end and they they've tried and tried and tried and tried, and it's just sort of the way that it's, as time has gone on, the way to manage is just to sort of get up and start the day and just sort of call it quits and get on with it. So it's wow, 4:30. I take my hat off to these parents because
definitely
it's a huge day, because it's not like when baby's going to bed or Martin's 14 months, so he's not technically a baby. I mean, he's a toddler, full-blown toddler.
Baby, little Marty.
But I just feel like, as parents, like when they go to bed, your day doesn't end. Like it's not like you're going to bed too. You've got all the jobs, all the things. You've probably
got other children.
Dinner. You've got other kids, perhaps. Yeah, that's right. And then just to know that once your head hits the pillow, which is who knows, 8, 9, 10 o'clock, I don't know. But you're back up again at 4:30 to
and at 10 p.m.
up.
for a full milk bottle.
Oh, yes, I forgot about that. Yeah. So there's a lot going on.
I mean, there's lots of different ways. We can look at the earliness factor. We can look at the giving him 15 minutes. We can look at the first timings of the day. Part of me, I also want to talk about the 6 p.m. bedtime because I know that in this case study, there had been early rising and another sleep consultant, which is a really popular thing at the moment, is to recommend a 6 p.m. bedtime as sort of the cure for early rising. We want to minimize overtiredness. Overtiredness is the cause of all things. And look, you and I talk a lot about overtiredness. And it does seem to come in waves of popularity that 6 p.m. bedtime is going to fix everything. But I think the first thing I want to say is that if, the way you and I work is we're aiming for roughly 11 to 12 hours of sleep overnight. So with a 6 p.m. bedtime, technically that gets us to potentially a 5 a.m. wake. Now, granted, there is a wake up in between, but in terms of overnight sleep totals, 5 a.m. is an incredibly fragile time of the morning for both for everyone. But from a sleep science perspective, it does not surprise me that 5 a.m. would be a 4:30 a.m. wake up. Lots of babies want to wake at the 10.5-hour mark chronically.
This is true.
So in which case, I can almost see that the 4:30 a.m. wake isn't truly early rising, but has this baby just hit their quota from such an early bedtime. Now, I will use an early bedtime of the 6s as a rescue plan. There's been a nap refusal. We're actively nap training, childcare. They've missed a nap, sickness. A lot of those things. Great. 6 p.m. is a rescue, but for me, it is a very short-term rescue plan and not the sort of catch-all of great. Well, a 6 p.m. bed will fix your sleep issues, because if that was the case, 6 weeks on, baby should not be waking still at 4:30 in the morning.
Well, I also think too that it's putting a lot of pressure on parents and little ones to sleep a full 12 hours, because I don't think that, sleep consultants would be wanting parents to start their day at 5. They're always trying to sort of, get to a more reasonable time frame. So I suspect that the idea behind the 6 p.m. bedtime is creating an opportunity for little ones to maximize their sleep and max out at 12 hours. So that would be like 6 to 6, which is just not that realistic. So in order for us to sort of, granted, there are some little ones, with everything that Sally and I talk about,
some can
there
do
are
this.
always babies who can do 12, 13 hours overnight. But Martin is not one of them. So we have to deal with Marty.
This isn't a criticism of sleep consultants that use a 6 p.m. bedtime as their go-to. I think what we're really hoping is that just in this example is for listeners to understand why we would do this differently, or why it hasn't been the solution that everyone was hoping it would be. And I also know that for some families, they need a 6 till 5. Based on timings and work and parents out the door, and it just works for them. That's no problem. If what you're doing is working, as always, keep going. But it's not working for Marty.
No. And in this scenario, I think we just sort of have to look at, okay, well, we need to restructure the day in terms of naps and so forth. And so once we start sort of going, okay, the 6 o'clock bedtime isn't working, we kind of need to aim towards more of a 7 p.m. How are we going to do that? And so we actually then sort of look through the day in terms of what's reinforcing the early rise. And the first thing that pops into our minds is the first nap. And so the first nap is it 9 to 11:30?
So for me, it's both the start time of it and the duration of it that can also contribute to this ongoing early rise, early to bed cycle. 9 till 11:30 he does.
Because the nap starting early, which is reinforcing the early rise, but also the length of the nap is really reinforcing that actually, hey, you don't need to worry so much about waking so early, because we're just going to,
you get to catch up.
You're going to have this, you're going to have this huge nap, and it's all fantastic and fun and games and all the things. And then on the flip side of that is that all the sleep quota is then taken into the morning nap, and then it becomes harder and harder for that second nap of the day to be a good chunky one. And so what we are seeing happening is that second nap is just a really quick, short one, which I think is creating some overtiredness going into bed. So being awake from 11:30 till 6 with a half-hour nap. And also too, so another layer to this is that the nap is 3 till 3:30, and then bedtime is 2.5 hours later at 6 o'clock.
6 p.m.
So everything just feels super, super wonky, because nothing sort of spread out evenly to be able to get things going and for enough sleep pressure. That's right.
His age.
Because even if you had the second nap finish at 3:30 at 14 months, we would still use a 4-hour gap to bedtime. And so a nap that finishes at 3:30, we would do a 7:30 bedtime. So everything feels wonky, and also then very rushed, because we're trying to do lots of things in preparation for a 6 p.m. bedtime. So solids are rushed, milk feeds are rushed, bath is rushed. They've just had a nap, like have they had enough playtime in between all this sort of business end of the day? So there's a lot of factors in here. And it really is, I hope that, one one thing that we're hoping families get out of this particular episode is the workings of a sleep consultant, like going in deep with us to try and figure out how we best get Martin out of this situation, because it's not a case of just going, you have to use the sleep training technique and that will fix everything. There is, and you can hear with our discussion that there are so many layers to this, and everything is sort of factored in.
To be honest, my mind hasn't even gone to sleep training yet. Like, I feel like we're so far off a sleep training technique, and you never know, maybe we don't end up needing it, because it does say he can self-settle. Yes, he's still waking overnight, but if we fix the rest of the day, could we organically fix that overnight waking or push it out later? And then he can use his self-settling skills that he's already got because he's primed better for sleep. So one of the first places I would start is rearranging these naps. So I'd actually do a bit of a switcheroo. So at the moment he's on a long short, and then going into bedtime overtired, cranky and tired. We're all about these hybrid words in the last few episodes. Cranky and tired. And so what I would actually do is give more sleep to the second half of the day, which in turn will give him a greater reserve for a longer wake window. You mentioned before 4 hours. Which already will push you to a later bedtime. And we get out of this sort of 6 p.m. jail, which is going, if we can get to in the 7s, will naturally encourage a later rise in the morning.
That's right.
So I would be popping him on our transitional schedule, which is incredibly age appropriate at 14 months. By no means would I be dropping to 1. I don't even know if that came up. Not in this scenario. That is not the cure either. So I would be doing a 10 till 10:30 a.m. nap 1. And I would be capping it strictly at 30 minutes, not 40, definitely not 45. We cap it at 30.
Not even 35. Not even 35. The difference
at 14
between
months.
30 and 35 minutes for this transitional routine is a full half hour, to your second nap. So, when you're doing a transitional routine, cap it at 30 minutes exactly.
So capped at 30 minutes. And then I would be pushing through to a 1 or 1:30, but probably initially a 1 till 3 nap, and then a 7 p.m. bedtime if we're using that 4-hour wake window. The other thing I just want to double back on is that if we push to a later bedtime, we're not pushing as in we're just going to keep him up longer. That wouldn't work on his current nap schedule. If we just said, okay, 6 p.m. is not the solution, we'll just stretch him to 7. We have to shift the whole day, because otherwise your overtiredness will become even more overtired off a 30-minute afternoon nap and a 4:30 a.m. rise. So this is about restructuring the whole day to get to a later bedtime, rather than just picking a number and keeping a baby up until that time. So what that would do for me is we keep the second nap. We don't reinforce an early rise. So we move from 9 a.m. to a 10 a.m. start. And rather than taking a chunky hour and a half in the morning, we're going to cap it strictly at 30 minutes. We're then going to give him a long afternoon nap at 1 o'clock-ish, and then a 4-hour wake window to bed. And then he will be going into the night better rested already. Maybe we see the 10 p.m. wake already drop off a little bit. Maybe not.
But the idea is that there's more sleep in the second half of the day so that they go into the night more well rested. One of the key elements to Martin's solution is reducing cortisol. And so if he's more well rested when he goes into bedtime and there's not such a high level of cortisol present, then there is maximum opportunity for him to breeze through that 10 p.m. waking. So we just need to maximize that. And then once we know that he isn't overtired, then it makes resettling that 10 p.m. waking a lot easier as well, because they're going to be more receptive, or he is going to be more receptive to the settling strategies that mum and dad may employ to get him back to sleep. So I feel like there is some chronic overtiredness happening, and that we just need to sort of work on structuring sleep pressure correctly so that then, we're lowering all of that and he can have a better night's sleep and a longer stretch.
Which may have been the original cause for the 4:30 a.m. wake that has now become habitual. And it only takes a couple of days for a baby's body clock to think, I'm now a 4:30 a.m. waker. If there was some overtiredness that has compounded over time, we know that overtired babies, due to that natural spike in cortisol, will wake more frequently overnight, and they love to early rise. And they can cry really hard. So I can imagine that giving him 15 minutes, they might think, what's the point? Like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
I'm just going to get up and start the day. But so the cycle continues. Now, I'd also be wanting to make sure, 4:30 a.m. is also the chilliest part of the morning. I want to know, what is Marty wearing? What's the room temperature? Are we getting the temperature reading off the monitor? In which case, I'd minus a couple of degrees. Where is the thermometer sitting if they're using that? Just making that little Martin is dressed warmly enough and he's in an appropriately high enough TOG rated sleeping bag, because he's going to naturally drop a couple of degrees himself just as part of his body clock. And if he's a fragile sleeper, then that's enough to be a full-blown wake up as well.
That's right.
So I always want to rule that out, particularly at 4:30 a.m. The other thing that I want to touch on is that if we get Martin to a later bedtime and he's going down a little bit more awake because he's had this long afternoon nap on our transitional schedule, he's had a great 4-hour wake window, and he's less cranky and tired, was he truly self-settling before? So going into the cot, wide awake, with some reserve, still, awake, and then able to truly put himself to sleep over the course of, let's say, 10 minutes? Or was he on this original schedule? Was it looking like self-settling, but he was just so tired that he just sort of collapsed into sleep? And what I do find is that when I work with babies like Martin and we move away from that level of exhaustion come bedtime, it turns out that they weren't, and we need to do some sleep training with a sleep training technique to just really consolidate that self-settling skill, so making that transition from awake to asleep on their own, so that then come 10 p.m. or any other overnight wakings and come 4:30 a.m. on the new schedule, that little Martin has the skills and that you're not just trying something new at a really tricky time of the morning.
Well, I think you can be really confident, or Martin's parents can be super confident, that he has the ability to self-settle. And the reason for that is he takes such a chunky nap in the morning, so that 2.5-hour nap.
Yes, he's linking a sleep cycle.
He is. So he's waking at the 40-minute mark. He's looking around. He's double-checking his surroundings, and he's going, "Oh, well, I'm all good. I'm going to go back off to sleep." So he is doing that several times over. And so seeing that within his day, when naps are typically, quite tricky to achieve, it makes us super confident that actually he does have the ability to self-settle. He's just maybe a little unsure when to use it. So it would be a case of going, he can definitely self-settle. We just need to present opportunities.
Yep.
And so that's where the sleep training side of things comes into play. But in order to do that, you do have to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. You've got to have all those ducks lined up, because you don't want to be using a technique for Martin at 10 o'clock at night or, 6 p.m. at bedtime when all these other things are just absolute. It's like a bomb's been lit behind him,
you. Yeah,
it is. That's right. And it would be kind of unfair to do that. So you just want to line everything up and then give him maximum opportunity to pop that skill into place by using a technique that features heavily on pattern and response, so that it's really clear and effective.
Yes. I think the other way these parents can take a huge amount of confidence, just hearing you talk about that first nap of the day, when we rejig things and we're going to a short long, sometimes a baby's body clock is not expecting the long. If they've been doing 30 minutes every afternoon for the last 6 weeks, that's their little alarm clock may still go off. But you take that same confidence of saying, oh, I've seen Martin put himself to sleep and stay asleep from 9 till 11:30 for goodness knows how long. I know he's got this skill. He's just not expecting it. So I'm going to, initially while we're making schedule changes, you might like to rescue the nap just to get to bedtime, just while we rejig things. We really like to stagger processes for families so it feels sustainable. And then once everything starts to settle down, you can encourage Martin to naturally start to lengthen that second nap on his own because you
Mm.
know he's got the skill. He just doesn't know that he needs to use it for nap 2.
Mm-hmm. This is correct.
Let's
One other
talk
thing
about,
too.
oh, yep, you go. There's so much.
Well, I think maybe you may be about to touch on it, is the milk side of things. So, like,
exactly.
were you about to do that? Oh, my God.
Yes, because I was like, let's talk about the picky
We're on the
eating.
same wavelength.
Yeah, that's us.
So a couple of things is that night feed is potentially impacting his ability to feed, have a great appetite for his solids through the day. Because Mum does mention that it's a full bottle, so I'm going to sort of assume that it's somewhere about between 180 and 240 mils. Now, also, and I don't think Mum does say this, but I'm going to take liberties and maybe assume that there may be a milk feed happening in the small hours, before brekkie and so forth. I'm not sure.
Like in 4:30, hope
Yeah,
this
like
will
when
do
they're
the
waking
trick
to
to
start
get
the
baby down.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, you'd try anything. 6
You
weeks
would.
of a 4:30 a.m. rise, I'd be offering boob, bottle, left, right, and centre.
Yeah, 100%. So while I'm not sure that there is milk in the mix, certainly a 10 p.m. feed has potential for this to happen anyway. So if there's a full feed going in, then that could impact, and this happens with 6-month-olds.
Yes.
That they're not interested in starting the day with a full feed or starting the day with breakfast, and they might sort of be snicky snacky, and then it's made up for with another snack, but then come lunchtime they're not hungry because they've just had a sneaky snack at 11 o'clock, and you're always sort of chasing your tail in terms of meals and feeds and snacks and so forth, and it just feels really for like a clunky, like what you would say, Sally. So in terms of creating a better appetite, we want to look at really anchoring in some feed times for solids. And if there's any other milk feeds, and at 14 months I would typically be down to a feed as part of the bedtime routine. That's optional. You don't necessarily have to have that. And the feed isn't in there to provide the calories that a little one needs in order to sleep through the night. That aspect of that milk feed is completely gone at this point.
At this age, yep.
Yeah, at this age, that milk feed is literally just because it is a nice, beautiful
ritual.
part of the routine, and it's nice. And some families will have an optional morning milk feed to start the day. Like, that's optional. But again, if you're seeing that the appetite is being impacted in way of solids, then it's probably something you could look at
and
reducing.
It could seem wild to a listener to think that a 10 p.m. bottle could affect, a 7 a.m., 8 a.m. breakfast sort of scenario. But at this age, it absolutely can. And I think reading the words picky eater, I often see that in my intake forms for older babies, even at, 20, 22 months. And when there is still milk feeds, full milk feeds in the picture, and we don't know Martin's exact milk feed scenario during the day, that is also something we would be looking at managing. They can sort of afford to be picky eaters.
Yes.
Because there's a degree of reverse cycling seems a very big word to use here, but he's getting calories overnight. So he can afford to be less interested during the day with solids because he gets to tank up at 10 p.m. And every time I look to wean out these overnight bottles for older babies like Martin, all of a sudden babies who parents thought were picky eaters devour their solids because they've got genuine appetite and enthusiasm, and parents are just so happy to watch their babies and toddlers eat.
And I think
they
don't
have to wake up for an overnight bottle.
Wow, no, that as well. And then the flip side is the grocery bill. I mean, that's always exciting. But
yes. Well, you and I already shop at Aldi, so we're doing the best we can.
But yeah, it can happen just that easily. And at 14 months, if everything is developmentally on track and following growth lines and all the things, you should be totally fine to sort of wean that out without conscience. You're fine to do away with it. And it will impact greatly other areas. So
absolutely.
The other thing too is if there's a milk feed offered, the internal clock is wired to expect calories at that particular time of the night. And so if the internal clock is wired to expect calories, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are genuinely hungry at that time.
Yes.
They're waking because it's a habitual wake.
Yeah.
And just like we referred to, earlier on, if there's a Tim Tam being offered at a certain time, I'm going to take it. It's my
Sign me
favorite
up.
thing.
I'd love a full packet at 10 p.m.
Yeah. And so toddlers, they love their milk. If they're going to be offered a bottle of milk, they're going to take it.
But also for parents looking down the barrel of another 4:30 a.m. wake, you'd also be picking your battles and think, oh, I'm just going to give them a bottle to go back to sleep because I'm going to see them.
About to start.
My day's about to start. So I think there's two things we're yet to touch on. What would we do with the 10 p.m. bottle? So assuming we've got all of the day naps now onto our transitional schedule, we've got all the day feeds lined up. We know that the environment is conducive to great sleep. We know that Martin is truly self-settling for bedtime. What are we going to do about the 10 p.m. bottle, the habitual wake that we've just mentioned? And then what are we going to do if that 4:30 a.m. rise, speaking about habitual internal body clocks, if that continues to present itself?
I'm just going to quickly shoot out two options from my perspective and then see what you think as well. I always work with parents' comfort levels, and so sometimes if it's like if there's a big change happening, and we are working on absolutely every aspect.
A bit of a sleep overhaul.
It really is.
Yeah.
I feel like, well, we've got 2 weeks together. I know that this is going to resolve itself within a few days, so it doesn't worry me if families feel like, oh gosh, we're rejigging the day. We're going to do a bit of sleep training. I'm not so sure that I can then give away the bottle as well overnight. What I would actually say is let's adopt a sleep training technique for bedtime if it's needed. And then we would use that same technique at 10 o'clock. So we would resettle that wake without the milk feed. And then we would feed the next.
Yes.
So we want to sort of break that habitual wake in terms of let's use the sleep training technique. But also what we will find is, okay, if we use that technique, is there a genuine hunger-related waking? That might sort of happen at around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Great. We'll offer a small feed. I would probably, because of his age, at Martin's age, I'd probably offer a 150 ml bottle, but I would 50-50 it. So I would dilute it, 50% milk, 50% water. That does two things. It's a smaller bottle, but also less calories because we've diluted it. It's not amazing taste. So, less interest to wake for the following night. So there's a few things going on with that. But also what it will then do is it will, if we are trying to sort of move through that 4:30 rise, there is some extra calories going in there to helpfully boost us to get through a little bit longer. So that would be option number one. Other families are kind of like, oh my God, let's just sort this out. I am ready. I'm ready. And they've been ready for a really long time and they've just needed someone to sort of hold their hand and guide them. In which case we would go with resettling all wakings overnight with the technique to go back off to sleep. And then we would use our early rise protocol to move through that in the morning. And then immediately you'll see the benefits of, okay, now they're actually hungry, to start the day. And then we sort of move pretty quickly through the stages, the following day.
It will start to course correct pretty quickly. So, so I am with you on both of those. I probably, for the majority of the clients that I work with, we'd be going with option one. What's behind door number one? Because it can feel intimidating, and I want parents to feel so rock solid come 4:30 in the morning when we do implement, or any other overnight waking, that we're not doing anything through hunger. The other thing is that there could be a degree of genuine hunger. If he's been smashing a 240 ml bottle, he could genuinely be anticipating, and particularly on night one, like it's very hard to get a perfect day before we go into the first night. So just to take the pressure off everyone, I would say, yes, we're going to resettle that first wake. I would probably say we're going to work to no feeds before midnight, which just from an age perspective is completely appropriate. We know that little Marty can go all night long without milk. I'd say no feeds before midnight. But if the waking doesn't happen at 10 and it happens at 11:30, we are absolutely committing to resettle until Marty goes back to sleep and then feed at the next one.
Yep.
Which, as you mentioned, maybe that's 1 o'clock. So that's sort of the timings that I would work to. I also think it's really helpful for tired parents to have a very clear plan. So saying something like no feeds before midnight, they can go into the night completely understanding what is a feed and what is a resettle for that first half.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that when I dropped a feed for my own baby at 8 months, it had snuck back in at 6 months with sickness, and then I was too scared to sleep train it out because I had a toddler that I didn't want to wake, and I actually went cold turkey. I just knew that was best for me and for us, and it took 2 nights. He cried on and off. It wasn't even full blown for 40 minutes, 2 nights in a row, never woke for it ever again. But I also had the confidence. I could back myself. I could back my baby. I knew that everything was lined up. This was purely habitual. This baby did not need it. And it would not have worked for me we were already down to 4 a.m. Like there's not much more pushing out I could already have done of that. So that is, you mentioned the cold turkey option. I myself have done that. I would probably err on the resettle number 1. And what I see so often in examples like Martin's, but in all sorts of sleep scenarios, is that when we get everything aligned, we truly nail self-settling at bedtime, babies naturally start to sleep through their habitual wakes. So maybe there is a world in which Martin naturally sleeps through. Maybe we do use a sleep training technique at bedtime and we've got to that point and he doesn't wake until 1 a.m. in the first place. Amazing. That happens all the time.
All the time.
It's just I always have these plans, and you're the same. We always have these because we never know what a baby's going to do. So if we go into the night saying no feeds before midnight and then he sleeps till 1, amazing. We didn't even have to implement the plan. We didn't have to do any of that sleep training. And it happens. It happens really often, in which case I'd be like, okay, this feed is on the way out, no feeds before 1 a.m. And if anything, we keep doing the same thing. We keep using the technique for the first waking and offering a smaller and smaller and smaller bottle until we can whittle it away and we drop it if he doesn't drop it himself. We still need to talk about 4:30 a.m. You just mentioned before the early rising protocol. And this is what we have started referring to, which is how you and I work to get a baby to no longer early rise, because we can do this whole thing. And Martin has been waking up 4:30 in the morning for 6 weeks. That is locked in to his little internal body clock. So what we have naturally done is encourage a later rise through scheduling, both of his nap durations, nap start times, and also now bedtime. We've just bought an hour from a 6 p.m. to a 7 p.m. bedtime. It would not shock me in the slightest if he still woke at 4:30 a.m. on morning 1, morning 2.
No, absolutely.
This is where you need to use, well, first of all, perfect environment, warm enough, dark enough, white noise still going, in case there's rubbish trucks or someone going to the gym or whatever it is. The birds, if anyone hasn't listened to our early rising series and doesn't know what we're talking about, I'd be wanting to say that to the 4:30 a.m. wake. You need to go and have a listen to our early rising podcast series because it all makes so much sense. But essentially, from here on out, you are delaying getting up until 7 a.m.
Yeah, and that feels super hectic for anyone who has been awake from 4:30.
Even as I said it, I was like, oh, that's going to sound like a stretch.
But this is the thing, like you've bought yourself hours. Like you've got to remember that 7 o'clock is kind of the ideal time frame to get up. Like if we pulled the hard yards in right at the beginning, this is part of sleep training. This is the part that can correct really easily if we are as determined to move through it as our little ones are determined to get up early. We've just got to sort of push through. It's really common, but you've got to create that time frame for your little one to understand that 4:30 is middle of the night.
Yes.
And so if we're only working for 15, 20, 30 minutes and then we're just calling it quits and getting up, we're reinforcing that early rise.
Yes.
So we actually have to release the idea that little Martin is actually going to fall back to sleep, regardless of if he falls back to sleep or not. We are getting up at 7.
Yes.
And then once you get up at 7 and you expose Martin to natural light, stimulation, we're up, the TV's on, brothers and sisters are out if that's the case.
Here's
We've
your
got,
Weet-Bix.
yeah, here's your Weet-Bix. We're having a lot of fun. Let's get ready for the day, blah, 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 blah. That highlights at 7 o'clock is the start of the day. And we're retraining the internal clock to get away from the idea that 4:30 is the actual time that we...
That's the middle of the night.
You'll always say too, Sally, which makes a lot of sense. It's like jet lag. We've got a new time zone. And so we have to be really super consistent, super persistent, and follow through to the letter in order for this to work. And it will work. You've got to follow all the processes. That the Early Rise podcast episode, I think there's 2 parts to it.
Yeah.
It is so worthwhile listening to because we literally give away all the secrets.
And we have so many people each week message us directly to say, I did what you told me to do and it fixed our stubborn early rise, but it will not work if Marty is still sleeping 9 till 11:30, 3 till 3:30, 6 p.m. bed. So it's really the final piece of the puzzle, and that's why you can see the sleep training aspect. It only comes into play once we've got everything aligned. And you might find he goes from 4:30 to a 5 a.m. waking, and 5 becomes 5:30. You just keep at it and don't see it as a failure if he does not go back to sleep between 4:30 and 7 a.m. on morning 1 and morning 2. If he does, fantastic. In fact, usually when I work with babies wanting to start the days in the 4s, they nearly always go back to sleep. It's when it's in the 5s where it gets a little bit trickier.
Yeah.
So let's work with Marty's 4:30 a.m. rise and say, okay, you've got sleep in the tank based on this new schedule. We're going to follow through with a really low stimulation sleep training technique, and I'll see you at 7 a.m. and we are just going to rinse and repeat this, the whole thing, until it all falls into place, and it absolutely will.
It will only take a couple of days. I just know because we're not reinforcing the early rise. We're getting everything, sleep pressure is accumulating beautifully all through the day, and then delaying getting up. It will all work in conjunction with each other. It's like all the pieces of the puzzle starting to slot into place. And these parents are going to feel like an absolute $1 million when they start seeing the results of all of their hard work. And you just have to see one thing fall into place for you to feel like, holy,
this is going to work.
This is going to work because these parents are so sleep deprived that they can't see the forest through the trees at this stage. And so it's little small wins will add to big wins. Big wins add to the entire shebang. Becoming a non-event. It will become seamless, beautiful sleep, and everyone knows what they're doing at what time, and it becomes just easy peasy.
Yep. And if you're listening to this and thinking this sounds like my scenario, regardless of your baby's age, whether they're younger, the same age as little Martin, or perhaps older, these are the juicy cases that you and I work with, and there is absolutely light at the end of this tunnel. In fact, I would look at this case study and I feel so excited for this family because sleep is coming for them.
Yeah, it is.
We'll do a big tidy up, do a little bit of sleep training to bring it home, and you will never look back, and nor will little Marty.
This is when we say your future self will love you for it, because these schedule changes, we are in control of a lot of these factors. So while we can't make a little one sleep, we can control things that can maximize their opportunity to sleep better. And for this family, there are so many aspects that we just tweak and modify to get to that point where Martin will be able to sleep really really, really well. And these moments are the best part of our job, don't you think, Sally? Like where,
Yep.
you know, it feels all like cactus. Everything
Yep.
feels like cactus as a parent, and their parents are reluctant to call on a sleep consultant because, you know, for various reasons.
It can feel too far gone.
It can.
Like, how
And,
could we
like,
possibly fix this?
And like I've read everything, I've done everything, I've done
Well,
this
they've even
suggestion.
spoken to another sleep
Another
consultant who
sleep
said,
consultant.
yeah, do this
Yeah.
and get on the 6 p.m. bedtime.
Yeah. And now they're forking out more money, you know, and it's just one of those things
Well,
like
they get a free podcast now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I think two things. It shows you that, you know, there isn't a one size fits all, because maybe the 6 p.m. would work for another baby. It hasn't worked for Martin. But I also want parents, and this is what you and I are an absolute mission to do, is to explain why. Because for you and I could be like, yes, we're going to do a 10 a.m. nap. We're going to do a 1 till 3:30, blah, 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 blah. And that can all sound well and good, but I need a parent to understand it so that they can implement it. Because if they're thinking, oh, well, this sleep consultant on the other side of the screen or the other side of the world said I need to do this, but why? And it's not working. It feels hard. You're likely to pack
I'm not really
it
sure
in.
why.
Yeah.
She said 1, but if I do 1:30, that's practically the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
So,
but actually, no, we really need the 1.
we need 1 initially.
And here's
I know.
why. Here's why.
And I did say 1 to 1:30, but again, I'm like, this would be case by case. But yeah, we want you to understand the why so that you can follow it through. So hopefully by pulling this apart and going through it all, it makes sense. It's got to make sense.
It's got to make sense. And the making it make sense gives you the confidence to follow through in those hard times. But you know what? I am looking forward to doing a little bit of a follow-up with Martin, and let's just see how he ends up.
Yeah. Marty, I hope you're listening.
Yeah, he's got his listening ears on.
He does.
But this is
just
fun.
don't be listening at 4:30 a.m. Yeah, if you want us to do more case studies, this is the sort of thing that we live for. So let us know, or we could even flesh out a scenario that we see in one of our questions. We can make it up. Also, you're just never alone in this. If Marty and his parents are experiencing this, someone else is too, and it's not because you were bad at this or your baby is bad at sleep. We just need to hit the reset button.
Yeah. And there is a lot of science behind it, and that's why it's tricky. And I always think about that Julia Roberts gif, you know, where she's sort of looking and there's the calculations going through. Oh,
yes.
Yeah,
the
so
mental
funny.
load.
Yeah.
Give us the mental load. You could see
give it to us.
we love
this. Yeah.
I know, we're sick like that. But we're well rested. That's probably why we've got capacity.
We're
all right,
sick
well,
like that.
I can't wait to hear about how little Marty goes.
Yes.
But now you've heard basically a consultation of what we would be doing. Game plan.
That's it.
We're Team Marty.
Times. Team Marty. All right. Well, let's get stuck into it, and you know, shoot us a message if you feel like you're stuck and you need some help.
You could be the next Snap Trap case study.
Absolutely.
All right. We will see you on the next episode. This was really fun, Beck.
Thanks, Sally. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.